Something happened on a practice range this week that nobody in professional golf is prepared to explain. This is not a highlight reel moment. This is not a slow motion swing clip going viral on social media. What Scheffler produced in a practice round, numbers that his own team reportedly did not expect, has coaches, caddies and tour veterans genuinely trying to figure out how to respond to what they just watched. We are talking about ball speed, approach proximity and strokes gain data that, according to people inside the tour's own performance analytics system, has no comparable sample in recorded PGA Tour history. Not from Tiger in 2000, not from Rory at his absolute peak. Nobody. Honestly, I think what Scheffler is doing to this sport right now is so far outside normal competition that the tour's entire field ranking structure cannot adequately describe it. He's not just the best player in the world, he's playing a different game. So here's the question. Is Scheffler the greatest ball striker we have ever seen on tour, or is the rest of the field just that far behind him right now? Drop it in the comments, subscribe, because what his numbers mean for the rest of the season is the real story here. Here's why this week's practice round data matters beyond the normal conversation about Scheffler being good at golf. The PGA Tour has been collecting detailed shot level analytics since 2004 through ShotLink. Every approach shot, every drive, every putt. Over 2 decades of data across thousands of players and hundreds of thousands of rounds. It is the most comprehensive performance database in professional golf. When tour officials want to understand how the game has evolved, or how a course is playing, or how a rule change might affect scoring, that's the database they go to. Scheffler's practice round numbers this week did not just put him at the top of some seasonal leaderboard. They produced strokes gained figures that the system's own historical benchmarks do not have a reference point for. Jay Monahan and the front office are sitting on a product that is generating numbers no one in the sport's history has generated. And the question they should be asking, the question nobody at Tour headquarters seems willing to sit with for long, is what happens to the competitive structure of professional golf when one player separates this far from the field. Not in one tournament, not in one season, over a sustained period with no sign of slowing down. Tiger Woods changed how players practiced, how courses were designed, how the sport was televised. Scheffler has not gotten that treatment yet. The mainstream conversation still frames him as the best player right now, rather than asking. Collin Morikawa is a 2-time major champion. 2020 PGA Championship, 2021 Open Championship. He is also one of the most technically precise ball strikers on tour. The kind of player who talks about swing mechanics and shot shape the way engineers talk about tolerances. He does not use hyperbole. When Morikawa describes another player's game, it means something because he understands at a mechanical level what he is actually looking at. After playing a practice round alongside Scheffler earlier this year, Morikawa told reporters, "He's just doing things out there that I don't see anyone else doing. I'm watching him hit shots and I'm thinking, yeah, that's not something I can replicate." Sit with that for a second. A 2-time major champion, a player who has won on the biggest stages in the sport, watching another player hit golf shots in a practice round and saying out loud with reporters present that he cannot replicate. That is not a compliment. That is a professional assessment from someone qualified to make it. Morikawa is not starstruck. He is describing a technical gap. The numbers back it up. Scheffler's strokes gained approach to the hole over the last 18 months sits at levels that only Tiger Woods in his 2000 season has come close to matching. And some of the newer proximity metrics that didn't exist when Tiger was peaking actually put Scheffler ahead in those categories. Not by a small margin, by a margin that analysts with the tour's own data team have reportedly described as historically unusual. That phrasing matters. Historically unusual. Not historically great, unusual. Meaning the system's own range of expected outcomes does not fully account for what it...
And here is where it gets uncomfortable for the rest of the field. In most professional sports, when one athlete separates this far from the competition, the sport adjusts. Equipment rules tighten. The playing surface changes. Something gets recalibrated to keep competition in a range that still feels competitive for viewers and for the other participants. Golf has the ball rollback. That conversation has been happening loudly for 2 years now. But the ball rollback debate is almost entirely framed around course protection and distance. Nobody in that conversation is saying the quiet part out loud. One of the reasons a rollback feels urgent right now is that one player has gotten so far ahead of the field that the sport needs to do something, anything, to make the gap look smaller. Is Scheffler so far ahead of the field that the tour needs to rethink how it structures competition around him, or is this just what peak performance looks like and everyone else needs to catch up? And does the ball rollback debate change your answer? Drop it below, I read every single one. Put yourself in Rory McIlroy's position. You spent the better part of the last 5 years being told by sponsors, by media, by the tour itself that you are the face of professional golf. The most recognisable player in the sport outside of Tiger. The player whose name moves needles, sells tickets, drives broadcast negotiations. You work harder than almost anyone on tour. You revamped your entire short game. You hired new coaches. You won the Players' Championship. You finally won. And then you look at the strokes gain data, and the gap between you and Scheffler is still there, still significant. In some categories, getting wider. That is not a knock on Rory. It is the description of how far ahead Scheffler is operating. The tour made an implicit promise to McIlroy and to the handful of players in his tier. Build your brand here. Stay loyal. The elevated events are built for names like yours. Your presence at the top of the game will be rewarded. That promise assumed a relatively competitive top tier, where 4 or 5 players were trading wins at the biggest events and nobody was just running away from the rest of the field consistently. Scheffler has broken that assumption, not through anything the tour could have predicted or prevented, but the result is the same. The elevated event model, signature events designed around star power and head-to-head competition between recognisable names, works better when the stars are actually competing with each other. When one player wins or contends at a rate that makes the outcome feel predictable before Thursday tee times, the product the tour built those events around starts to look different. Now here's the part nobody's talking about. The tour's current television deal, renegotiated as part of the post-LIV restructuring conversations, is built around the premise of unpredictable competition between elite players. The broadcast partners paid for drama. They paid for Sunday back nines where the outcome is not obvious until the 17th hole. Scheffler's practice round data, if it reflects what we see in tournament play this season, creates a very specific problem for those broadcast conversations when they come up for renewal. A sport where one player wins 30 to 35% of the events he enters and contends in most of the rest, the tour cannot say this publicly. Admitting that one player has gotten too good would be absurd. But the broadcast partners are not watching the leaderboard through rose-tinted glass. They have their own analytics teams. They see the same numbers, and those conversations are already happening. One voice in the current conversation is pushing back against the idea that Scheffler's dominance is a problem for the sport.
and it's the last name you'd expect. Bryson DeChambeau, who is not on the PGA Tour, who left for LIV and has been one of the most publicly critical voices about tour management over the last 3 years, went on record recently and said something genuinely surprising. He called Scheffler's performance level good for golf and compared it to the Tiger era. DeChambeau is not wrong on the history. Tiger's dominance did draw viewers. The ratings were better when Tiger was winning than when the field was open. That is a documented fact from broadcast data during that period. But here's where even Bryson's defence misses the point. Tiger's dominance happened before streaming, before the attention economy fractured sports viewership into dozens of competing platforms. Before a 21-year-old could watch 30 seconds of a golf highlight on a short-form video app and feel like they've consumed the product without ever watching the broadcast. Scheffler winning by 4 shots does not produce the same commercial value as Scheffler and McIlroy going head-to-head on the 72nd hole. And right now, those head-to-head moments are getting rarer because the gap is that wide. Is Scheffler's dominance good for professional golf the way Tiger's was, or is the sport actually in trouble when one player is this far ahead of the field? Be honest, drop it in the comments. The Masters last year, Scheffler won by 4. The year before, he won by 1 in a back 9 that had genuine drama. The Players' Championship this season, he was the 54-hole leader and the field never seriously threatened him down the stretch. 3 of the last 7 major championships have been won by Scheffler. In the other 4, he either contended into the final round or missed a cut for reasons related to a short game week that would not be described as short game struggles for any other player in the world. Here is the number that should concern the tour's broadcast partners. In Scheffler's 11 starts on tour this season, he has finished outside the top 10 exactly twice. Both of those were weeks where his putter went cold. His approach play and driving were still elite in both rounds. When the only variable keeping Scheffler from winning is whether his putter cooperates, you do not have a competitive field. You have one player and a lottery for second place. You spent 10 years grinding to get into elevated events. You qualified, you showed up, you played well enough to get yourself onto the same leaderboard. And on Sunday afternoon, you're not really competing for the win, you're competing for the top 5 check, while the cameras are focused entirely on the guy in the lead who has been there since Friday morning. Here's the real question nobody wants to ask directly. What is the PGA Tour actually selling in 2025? If the answer is golf, the sport, the game, the craft, then Scheffler's performance level is purely a celebration. He is the greatest advertisement for what this sport can look like at its highest level. Watch him hit a low stinger under the wind on 16 and you understand immediately why people spend their lives trying to get this game right. But if the answer is competition, genuine uncertainty about who is going to win, stakes that feel real on Sunday, drama that justifies 4 hours of your weekend, then the tour has a product issue. And it is sitting at the top of the world rankings wearing a green jacket. The tour is selling a competition that is no longer fully competitive at the top. That is the systemic issue underneath all the practice round excitement and strokes gained records and historical comparisons. The tour built a structure around elevated events and signature moments between elite players. The structure assumed rough competitive parity among the top 8 to 10 names. Scheffler has made that assumption obsolete. This is not Scheffler's fault. You cannot blame a player for being too good. But the tour's inability or unwillingness to acknowledge what his data actually means for the product they are selling, that is a choice. And choices have consequences when the broadcast contract renewals come up. Is the PGA Tour responsible for managing competitive balance when one player is this dominant? Or Is that the wrong job for a tour to have? Drop your answer right now. Here's what to watch for. The next major is the first real test of whether this week's practice numbers translate into tournament performance at the level his team expects. If Scheffler wins and the data holds, the conversation about competitive balance at the top of the tour stops being a background discussion in analytics circles and becomes a front page problem for the broadcast partners who wrote those checks. If something goes sideways, if the putter goes cold again, if the field produces a Sunday that nobody predicted, the tour gets a temporary reprieve. The narrative resets. Everyone talks about competitive golf being unpredictable. But the data does not reset. The practice round numbers are already in the room. The people who understand what they mean are already thinking through implications that haven't hit the public conversation yet. One sentence, that's where this lands. The PGA Tour has the greatest player in the history of the sport and no framework for what that actually does to the product they are selling. If you want the breakdown of what Scheffler's numbers mean for the upcoming major field, subscribe.